Hi, great to have you here. Today I want to take a look at what San Diego Comic-Con 2024 S.H. Figuart Dragon Ball figures we may get this year. These come out in July and get announced in June, so I figured now that we're in May, let's take a look. For those who aren't aware, historically you can only pick these up at the convention in person. However, over the last few years, they added the ability to order online after the convention and receive at a later date. I expect this to continue since I presume it's been a successful value add for Tamashii to offer. Traditionally, we get 4 figures per year, but last year they gave us 3 and had a Figuarts 0 statue as the 4th inclusion. We'll have to see if they continue that approach since I assume the standard Figuarts are in higher demand. For the sake of this video, I'll be picking 4 figures. Alright, on the screen here I have all prior exclusives. These are from San Diego Comic-Con, New York Comic-Con, and also one-off exclusives with the likes of Clone Goku and Android 21. I do want to give a shout out to Rock Chala, which is where I pulled this list. And I'll be ultimately using this list to help make predictions for 2024. Taking a look at these exclusives, there's really subtle differences that take place between the original release and the exclusive. They generally stick to things like repaint, whether it's using the manga versus anime coloring or more of a metallic shine. There are significant ones that do take place though, like you can see the Planet Arlie of Vegeta on the top there, as well as the Goku Ultra Instinct sign that we have as well. I feel like over the last few years, they've really started to branch out, where we had the Super Saiyan 2 Goku. We had last year especially, we had the Gohan that came with the Ghost Goku. We had the Raditz that came with the Sun Gohan. So there's kind of a variety of differences that we ultimately get here. They're generally not super significant, but that does seem to be changing in some ways. So we'll see if they continue that trend of adding more and more unique things that are beyond just small changes to colorations. Alright, shown here is all of our general and premium Bandai releases to this point in time. This doesn't include the aforementioned exclusives that we just covered. When looking at what they're going to be potentially coming out in 2024 with, we really look at this list of prior releases because they use this and then do some kind of retooling from a prior release when determining what they're going to have for their convention exclusives. As mentioned, maybe something as small as a repaint. They may add some really wild addition to a prior release, but whatever they wind up doing, it's going to come from one of these previous original releases. So my approach in making predictions here will essentially start with the process of elimination and then go from there. To note, they pretty much always have one Goku incorporated in some way. Ghost Goku from last year is probably the least he's been utilized at this point, but they have generally some fashion of a Goku woven into one of the exclusives. So starting off with kind of how we can first eliminate things, I'm starting off with removing any figure that's gotten a prior convention release. They could wind up doing a redo or a variation of some kind of unique other difference to a prior convention exclusive, but for the sake of trying to trim down our list, we're just going to assume none of these figures that are previous exclusives are going to be done in some other fashion again. There's probably some ones from years ago that they could consider doing something extra to this time, but as I said, for the sake of this review, we're just going to be assuming they're not going to be doing that. They're going to be doing something brand new that they haven't done previously. From there, after we've taken out those previous convention exclusives or any kind of exclusives in general, I think the next best approach is to remove most of the figures that have come out in the recent past. So I'm taking kind of our right bottom quadrant here and just saying none of these figures realistically are going to be used as a convention exclusive just because their release was so recent that they wouldn't want to try to cannibalize those prior sales from those figures themselves. So when looking at what is left, we'll be looking at the other 3 quadrants to determine ultimately what could be selected this year. Now that we've taken a look at prior exclusives and recent figure releases and trimmed our list down from there, I think from here we can kind of go from each row down, taking a look at saying on a one-by-one basis what's realistic here, and there's ones that will ultimately get taken off for one reason or the other and leave us with a shorter list to then make our picks from. Alright, so based on what we have left here, on the top row we have a lot of old releases, and I think we can probably eliminate all of these just because there's more recent versions of each of these that we can be considering at this point in time. So we have a Super Saiyan Vegeta, I think we can cross off, a Super Saiyan 3 Goku there, and then a Trunks that we've had a few times, so we can cross all those off. Moving down to the next row, we have a Frieza. We have so many variations of 4th form Frieza, so we can just cross off this one for the time being. We have an old Krillin, same situation. We have a retool of him at this point in time. Jumping down to the next row, we have an older Super Saiyan Blue Goku from the Frieza movie. I think we can take him off. And then once again, another Super Saiyan Vegeta. We can remove him. Now to the next row, we have a Super Saiyan Trunks. I'm not thinking we do anything here. I know we've had a few iterations of this. We just had a re-release of the recent one due to kind of the QC issues that one experienced. So I'm not thinking we do anything there. Then we have the Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta. Another one from the Frieza movie. I think this one probably gets removed just because we've had so many Super Saiyan Blue Vegetas in general anyway. We have the general release that's coming out later this year. We just had the vote for the anniversary that came out on Premium Bandai. So there's been a lot of Vegeta in general that's come out in the recent term, but especially Blue, so I feel like this one's not going to be happening. Then we have the Super Saiyan Trunks. We just got a redo of that one. I don't think they're going to be doing that necessarily. And then Super Saiyan Vegeta, same situation there. Down to the next row, we have a Perfect Cell. I'm thinking we probably put out a Perfect Cell at some point in the near term because we're in the Android Cell saga as far as releases go, so I'm not thinking that he's realistic for a convention exclusive. You could surprise me. I know last year I was kind of surprised we went to Super Saiyan 2 Gohan because I thought he was going to be a released figure for the near term, but they wound up putting out that Super Saiyan Gohan with the cape this year, and I'm assuming we'll do a Super Saiyan 2 at some point, but maybe he'll be a 3.0 at that point. But all that to say is I don't think Cell's going to be used because I think Cell's going to be a general release sometime soon. But I guess if they could, in theory, try to reuse some of those parts that he had before without, just giving up on that build entirely. So, possible, but for the sake of this, we're going to say no. Then we have these Universe figures. We have Trunks and then the created character. I think those, while both are really cool, I think those are from a point in time when the Xenoverse games came out, so I don't think those are going to be happening. Regular Saiyan Saga Vegeta. I'm going to leave this one on here for now. I think this one has a possibility of having something come into play here just because I think eventually we will get a 3.0 Saiyan Saga Vegeta, and they may want to do something with him that utilizes that mold kind of one last time. Next up, we have Super Saiyan 3 Goku. This is one I had really high on my thoughts as far as a convention exclusive. I thought they could do something like possibly a metallic gold hair instead of just the generic yellow colored hair. Have a battle damage look as well. They could do a lot when it came to Super Saiyan 3 Goku as far as a convention exclusive. The only pause I have is I know we've had a reissue of him a couple times, so I think there's another reissue even coming out at this point. So would they put out a convention exclusive knowing that they have a reissue coming out and trying to just combine sales there? It's possible. I think, as I said, if you have a metallic hair and then a battle damage, it could be different enough that you get folks wanting to double dip, or those folks that already bought the Super Saiyan 3 that may want a different version anyway. So I'm going to keep them on here for now because I think there's a potential there since, as I said, we always have some kind of version of Goku. This is one that I think is a possibility. Moving down to the next row, we have Yamcha and Tien from the Saiyan arc. I don't think either of these make sense. I could see something just because, they don't have a whole lot of variations. We did just get the Cell Saga Yamcha though, so would they put out another Yamcha so quickly? I'm not so sure. Tien, we're going to revisit a little bit later on. I'm going to cross off this version of him for now, just for the sake. And then finally we have Fourth Form Frieza on the end there. Similar to how I mentioned before, we have so many Fourth Forms Friezas. I don't think this one is worth really talking about at this point in time. The next row is where we kind of start to get to a lot of options. We have Saiyan Raised on Earth Goku. Now this is one we've had for a long time. They've done a reissue of this as well. I think they could do some kind of variation with him for a convention exclusive. Something that came to mind originally was something with a Yardrat look, but I think that's different enough mold that it wouldn't necessarily be a convention exclusive. One thing that I do think is possible though is some version of Goku when he is battling Raditz with Piccolo. So when he has, all of his gi kind of taken off at that point, he has his wristbands and so forth taken off, his shoes taken off. I think we could get some kind of battle version of that first appearance in Z where he fought Raditz. You could get even a Piccolo attack. Essentially, you could get some. I know people complain that the Beast Gohan was the first person to get Piccolo's attack, essentially. So I think you could get some kind of add-on there accessory with a special beam cannon, but Either way, I think there's a possibility Saiyan Rays on Earth could be something that we leave here just because there's some variation of him that you could use here. You could even have like a Nimbus Cloud included with him. There's stuff that you could do with that Saiyan Rays on Earth Goku that they haven't done to this point. Then we have Master Roshi. This is one I'm going to keep on here. We haven't had a OG Dragon Ball inclusion in a while. They've kind of abandoned the OG Dragon Ball line. It feels like I'm not sure what I think the last figure we have had maybe have been some form of Bulma. I know they did the Kid Goku New York Comic-Con, or the New York Tamashii store exclusive. So there is small bits that they have still used from OG Dragon Ball, but for the most part they haven't revisited that line in a while. I'm going to keep him on here now because I know Roshi is a very sought after character as far as a figure goes, so I'm not sure what exactly variation they could do, but it's been a while since they've put any Roshi out in general. I know people have complained that we haven't gotten that Tournament of Power Roshi that ever came out when they first demoed that guy, so I'm going to leave him as well. Then we have Super Saiyan Gotenks. He's one I'm going to leave for now. I think there's some stuff you could do with him. I know we're kind of eventually going to get into the Buu arc, so there's going to be a revision of him, but there's probably going to be a little bit of time before we get to that point, so I think it's fair to say they could do a convention exclusive here. I don't know if they would do something as crazy as a Super Saiyan 3 head with him, but you could do some different variations with Gotenks in general, so I'm going to leave him. And then Super Saiyan Trunks from Dragon Ball Super. I'm going to keep him as well. I know I mentioned we've done a lot of Trunks recently, but this version of Trunks has been a while, so if they were going to do something with Trunks, I could see this one being the one that they went back to. Alright, moving on down to the next row. First up we have Krillin from OG Dragon Ball. I don't think this is one that we're realistically going to be looking at. I think that Roshi is really the only one from a Dragon Ball perspective has a likelihood of coming back for a convention exclusive. So we're going to take off Krillin for now. Next up we have Hercule. I'm going to leave Hercule on. Originally I was thinking he's not overly popular as far as a character goes. He's not, one of your typical Saiyans or Piccolo or anything like that as far as a lot of hype around him. He is pretty important at the end of the show though with the Buu saga as far as his importance of ultimately defeating Buu. So he's kind of a fun character. You can do a lot of different things with him. I'm going to keep him on here for now. I'm not sure how well he would necessarily sell as far as popularity goes, but I'm going to leave him for now. Same situation with next up with the Great Saiyaman. I don't know how well he would sell necessarily, but it's been a while since we've gotten a Great Saiyaman, and I think you could do some kind of cool convention exclusive headpiece with him where he's very angry when Videl is getting attacked at the tournament there. So there's a lot different you could do with him. You could have some of the metallic stuff they've done in the past you could do with him and his armor, so I'm going to leave Great Saiyaman on for now. Next up we have Super Buu. I don't know if this one makes sense. I think the only thing I would consider is if we could get a variation of a different Buu, like with a Buu Tanks or Buuhan, so I'm going to leave him for now, but he's not one that I necessarily overly think, because I think a Buuhan or Buu Tanks would be a lot of significant changes, although there is pressure from third parties doing some of those builds, so that's the reason I'm going to keep him for now, but I'm not sure I'm overly sold on that possibility. The next two kind of lumped together. We have the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie, we have the Full Power Broly, and the Super Saiyan Blue Gogeta. As I said, I'm going to leave these all in here for now as well. I'm not sure, since they're movie figures, if they're necessarily ones that they would go back to, but Broly always sells. I know they've done the original Broly as a convention exclusive, so it makes sense that Super Broly, a lot of people will like this figure. He's sold out. He's not available anywhere really at this point, so he's somebody that would be a popular figure if they did a re-release of him in some convention fashion. With the Super Saiyan Blue Gogeta, I'm going to leave him too, but I think he's a little bit less likely. They already have him as a power down version and a Super Saiyan Blue version. You could do something with Super Saiyan hair, but technically he doesn't do that in the movie, so I'm not sure how appropriate it would be. So we'll keep him, but he's not necessarily high on my list, I would say. From there, we have another Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta. We're going to cross this one off for the reasons I mentioned earlier, just with how frequent we've gotten that figure to this point in time. In the next row, we have Android 21. I'm going to cross off. She's essentially from Dragon Ball FighterZ, so I don't necessarily think she's a really integral character to Dragon Ball itself. And then we have our Super Saiyan Blue Goku. We've already gotten a convention exclusive previously with the Kaioken Super Saiyan Blue figure, so I'm not sure we'll get this one. I'm going to remove him for this time. Then we have Zamasu. I'm going to leave this one on here. I know we've gotten different versions of kind of the Zamasu character in general, so I'm just going to leave this one as the representation of him. We haven't had a super figure in a few years when it came to San Diego Comic-Con exclusives. I think it's been a couple years, but I think the last ones we've had were Whis and Beerus. So I think it's highly likely they could return to Super, or possibly one of those other lines like original Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball GT, just to provide that variation. So Zamasu could be that option here. He has a lot of versatility and things you could do with that character. Next couple are from Dragon Ball again. So we have Piccolo and then Bulma. These ones I'm going to cross off, kind of as I mentioned. I think if you do an OG Dragon Ball exclusive, Roshi has to be kind of the one you go back to at this point in time. I don't think doing these other characters that... I'm pretty sure Piccolo from Dragon Ball still is available most places for retail or even cheaper, just because they made so many of him and he's been out for so long at this point in time. Then we have Jiren. So I'm going to keep this Jiren on here. I know there's two versions of Jiren we've gotten. We've gotten the regular one and then the full-powered kind of battle damage one. I'm just going to leave one as representing Jiren in general. I think we could get some convention exclusive of one of the versions. This one I think is possibly more likely just because you could have more of a metallic sheen with his red suit that he wears essentially. We don't have a whole lot of background on Jiren as far as providing a lot of versatility for a convention exclusive, but he's been out for so long that I think people would be interested in going back and picking him up. I think his popularity kind of rose after he released, so I think this is one that makes sense for a convention exclusive to be utilized for. Alright, this next row, we're going to wipe out a lot of these pretty quickly. So we have the two original Dragon Ball villains. Same situation. I don't think we revisit those. We have the Ultra Instinct Goku. We just had the Toyotaro version that came out on Premium Bandai, and we also are getting a reissue of this version of Ultra Instinct Goku later this year. So I think they've kind of Ultra Instinct out at this point, so I don't think he's realistically going to be the version of Goku that we get this year. I'm going to cross off the Kaioken version as well, just because we also just had the Target and Walmart exclusive reissue of the matte finish of this figure, so I don't see them necessarily doing another Kaioken variation. Ginyu, I'm going to take off here as well. I don't think they do any of the Ginyu Force. They're kind of one set for the most part, so it would be weird. I mean, Captain Ginyu, I guess you could do something unique with. That would be pretty cool, but at least for the rest of his team, it would be weird to get like a Raccoon, color variation when you don't have the other Ginyu Force in that same version. So unless you just redid the entire team as a convention pack, which I don't see ever happening, they're probably off my opinion as far as realistic reconsiderations for Comic-Con exclusives going forward. Next up is somewhat of a dark horse pick for me, and that's the Grade 8 Vegeta. This is one I thought maybe they would do last year, but we didn't get, so I'm going to put it on my consideration list for this year. A couple years ago, they did the larger Shenron release as a metallic shiny version of him. I don't think that one sold overly well. I think they were still trying to sell that even as recently as a couple months ago, so I don't think Shenron specifically was a high seller. He's kind of more of a statue figure that's, representing like kind of the mascot of Dragon Ball at this point. Grade 8 Vegeta, while still not necessarily in scale with the rest of somebody's collection, I think he's more desirable. I think people still at this point try to get him on the aftermarket for really high prices, so I think putting out a variation of this Grade 8 Vegeta would make a whole lot of sense. You could have some kind of more battle damage look to him. I know people made customs previously where they added a little bit more paint and things of that sort to the character. I think traditionally he just kind of had that generic white chest armor that didn't really look that battle damage, so they could really lean into having more of that, in-action look to him. There's also probably additional accessories they could explore looking at. I know they had the Yajirobe whole thing previously, so something along those lines I think is a realistic possibility, or something I personally would say this is something that would be successful. And then wrapping up that row, we have the Chi-Chi version of from Dragon Ball. Once again, I'll say it again, the Master Roshi, as far as Dragon Ball goes, is the one character I would say makes sense for a convention exclusive. If they put somebody else out, I'm going to be really surprised. All right, with this next row, we're starting off with the bike. I think we take this one off. I don't think we've ever really done a convention reissue of a vehicle or even really an accessory. I think the only thing at a convention we ever had was Goku's power pole, so I'm not thinking we can get this one this year. Next up, we have Jiren. I already talked about him. I think he's a very likely possibility. We're going to take off this version just to limit us to having one Jiren that we're really taking a look at. Same situation with Zamasu. We're going to really look at one Zamasu as a possibility. Then we have Super Saiyan Blue, Vegito. I think Vegito's a pretty popular character, and I could see them doing some kind of convention exclusive with him. They already went back to doing a Super Saiyan Blue Vegito, though, so would they do that again? It's certainly possible. They could do something else with him, but for the sake of trying to get a condensed list, I'm going to say no for now, but I think this one's kind of on the fringe of it could be possible, but I'm leaning no at this point. And then next up we have Piccolo. I think this one we're going to keep on for now just because they haven't really done much with Piccolo when it came to exclusives. I know we had the original 1.0 back in the day, but since then I don't think they've done really anything Piccolo related for conventions. And I think they could do a lot when it comes to him. I mentioned kind of that Saiyan Raisin Earth Goku could have a special beam cannon inclusion. I think that could apply in this situation too. I think you could give the original Piccolo that special beam cannon. You could do some other unique things with him as well. So I'm going to leave him on here for now. From there we have Kid Gohan. I don't think, realistically, there isn't a lot that I feel like they could do with him. We already had Teen Gohan last year. We had the really young Kid Gohan as part of that Raditz pack. So I don't think they do anything with this version of him. I talked about the Ginyu Force already, so Jace we're going to be moving on from. With the next row, we have Bardock. This is one I'm going to keep. I think this has a very reasonable possibility that he could be a convention exclusive. We haven't ever gotten him with his Super Saiyan hair, so I think that could easily be a convention addition for Bardock. I know we just, at the end of last year, had a reissue, so they have the molds ready available, but it's not something necessarily that they're overly pushing right now. So I'm going to say Super Saiyan, especially, version of Bardock is a possibility. So we're going to keep him out there. Raccoon, we talked about taking off the Ginyu Force. First Form Frieza. Well, this one's a possibility. I'm not really sure what you would do. You already got him with his pod, which was a really cool addition. I don't think there's anything more they can really do with him. It's certainly possible. He's probably in that same category as the Super Saiyan Blue Vegito, where I don't necessarily have a strong case to say this is why absolutely he's not going to be included. But if I'm picking a list, he's not somebody I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to advance him as making the final group of characters. Birder, we took off with the Ginyu Force. And then we have Hit. Hit's in the same category. He's the final character here that I've mentioned. We haven't jumped back into Super in a while, so in the event that we did, Hit would fall in the category of somebody I could see them doing a convention exclusive for. Raditz was, I think, the most recent convention exclusive, or I guess we had the 2.0 Super Saiyan Goku kind of as well, but Hit would be one of the more recent reuses for a convention. But I think him, Jiren, Zamasu, and then obviously like the Super Broly movie characters, those are the ones as far as from Super, as well as I forgot Super Trunks as well. Those are the characters I could see us going back to for a convention exclusive. So Hit's kind of that last one in that group of characters that fall in that category. Then next row we have the accessory kit, same situation as the bike. I don't think this makes sense for a convention exclusive. We have Launch. I'm not thinking anything there. We have the Rosé. That's one we've already done convention stuff with Goku Black. I would say there would be a possibility there, but we have had this version of Rosé reissued a handful of times. I think he's actually coming out again later this year, so doing another exclusive with especially the Rosé version of Black, I don't see happening. Then we have Cooler. I'm going to keep Cooler on the list. I know we haven't ever really had a movie character in a convention exclusive for San Diego. I know we had like the Super Broly, I guess, at New York Comic Con, but nothing comes to mind as far as San Diego Comic Con Z movie figures that we've gotten. I think Cooler was one of the originals, so he's one I could see them doing something with, just because he's a character that most people have at the top of their, if they have him in their collection, he's probably 1 through 3, one of their favorite characters in their collection. So him being available again to folks would make everyone extremely happy. So I'm going to keep him on the list. Then we have Tien. I know I mentioned Tien and Yamcha before, and Yamcha kind of have a recent release, so making him not really realistically going to be coming out with something. Tien I'm going to keep on the list for now, just because you could have him in a different outfit. You could have him in his End of Z outfit, where he's got kind of more of the large amount of cloth that he's wearing. That mold may be a pretty unique change, so I'm not sure they would do that entirely, but Tien is somebody for now I'm going to keep, just because you could do some different things with him, and it's been a little bit of time since we've had this prior release of Tien. Bulma I'm going to take off. She's not somebody I realistically think anybody wants a variation of the Namek Bulma. I'm not sure what all you would do there, so taking her off. Then the last one on the list as far as realistic possibilities, I'll talk through the others as well, but Super Saiyan 4 Goku, I think this one has a reasonable chance of having something out there. GT line has really been starting to be dug into really heavily at this point in time, and Super Saiyan 4 Goku was one of the first ones to kick that off. He sold really well, people really like the figure, and he's somebody I could see being that representation of Goku when it comes to a convention exclusive, just because how popular he was. And if you had some kind of more unique version with him, I think it would sell really well. I don't know what all you would do as far as different. You can maybe have him having a little bit of that Great Ape face or something like that, or I know Dragon Ball does. These figures don't really do like flocked or anything like that. Obviously, his arms are technically made of fur, but I'm not thinking we necessarily get anything along those lines. But you could do something different enough with him that he's popular enough that if you put out another version with him with something small changed, I think people would buy it. Next couple rows, I'll talk about them. We have the 2 androids from Super. I don't think those are realistically going to be doing something unique with him at this point in time. Then we have Krillin. Krillin's just a character in general I'm not sure what else you do with. He's kind of just Krillin. Like there's not many changes you could have to him. You already gave him his Destructo Disc and his general release version, so what else will you give Krillin? So for that reason alone, I'm going to say, for now, I don't necessarily think anything special comes with him, or he doesn't come out as an exclusive. Then we have Kefla. This is one that's a possibility. I know a lot of people didn't like the Kefla release, so for that reason, I'm going to say she's probably not the representation of Super that we'll get, potentially, just because she wasn't overly popular when she came out originally, as far as articulation, things like that were not overly impressive, so taking her off the list. Fourth form Frieza, I know I removed the other ones, and this is kind of the last one left to look at. I still think fourth form Frieza, we've gotten so much Frieza over the last year. We got every version of him. We got the buff one coming out. We just got, his Mecha Frieza form, so I don't think Frieza probably doesn't make sense as a convention exclusive at this point in time. We've gotten his golden form previously as well, so I don't think that we're going to be revisiting him this time around. The Dory and Zarbon I took off. I think they're kind of the same as the Ginyu Force. You're not going to do a whole lot with them that makes sense for a convention exclusive. Zarbon, I guess you could do his, bulked up form, but I think a lot of people would be very angry if you put that out as a convention exclusive and not a individual release, just because that's a pretty big change and a lot of people really want that version of him. So I'm not sure that you would realistically do that as a convention piece. Then the final row, we get kind of into the superhero characters here. We have the Piccolo here. I think this Piccolo could be reused just for one reason, actually. I'm going to leave it off for now, but I think there's a possibility. The one thing I would say is you could have Piccolo when he's kind of in that yellow turning into orange Piccolo form. So he's semi-orange Piccolo, and he's just kind of in that yellow state where his skin's starting kind of to change, and he's starting to change form. That's all I can really see from a use of this superhero Piccolo. The other characters here, I don't see anything. The Goku and Vegeta are pretty irrelevant from the superhero movie, other than they're kind of a few minutes of here and there. Gohan is super popular, but they're making a new, they're reissuing his release, and we had so many extras throughout the previous release as far as extra heads and so forth that came out with other characters. I don't think there's anything really to add there. Then we have Gohan from the Frieza saga in his Saiyan armor. I'm not thinking anything really could be done here that's different than what you already got. We have Cell's saga, first form Cell. Same, kind of with these last three are all the same boat, where I'm not thinking there's anything that makes sense at this point in time as far as a change. You know, we had first form Cell. I think he's actually still available at retailers, so double dipping there doesn't entirely make sense. Then the Krillin in his armor as well, same issue as Gohan. Not anything unique enough that we can add here that would make it worth a convention exclusive. So with that, let's take a look at our list in a more condensed form, and from there, kind of narrow down our selection to 4 picks. Alright, so after removing all the characters we've eliminated to this point in time, we're left with these 20 as what I see as potential options for the Comic-Con exclusives. We'll start with the Goku. As I mentioned before, we typically have gotten some variation of a Goku in past years, so these are the 3 I think it's probably between. From here and narrowing it down from these 3, we'll start with taking off Super Saiyan 4. I know the GT line is really starting to crank out at this point. We haven't had a con exclusive from the GT line yet, so I think eventually we do get one, and I think Super Saiyan 4 would be a great option there, but since it's not something we've done to this point in time, I'm going to eliminate that one first as being something that will be selected this year. So now down to Saiyan Raised on Earth or Super Saiyan 3. I'm a little torn here, but next up I'm going to eliminate the Saiyan Raised on Earth. I mentioned before that I think it'd be really awesome to get some variation where you have him fighting Raditz with his wristbands and boots and so forth off, making that really iconic fight between him and Raditz with Piccolo. But at this point, I just lean more towards the Super Saiyan 3 as the option. I know there's been the whole reissuing, and we have another reissue of that coming out this year, so it's possible they won't want to double down on the same character again, but having the option to do a metallic hair and battle damage look is something that I think fans would really enjoy, and that's going to be my pick as far as Gokus go. Next, we're going to look at the 4 characters from Super that I have on here. I think my thoughts are that we're going to get one of these 4 characters, so it's just a matter of choosing the one that seems the most likely. Starting with Zamasu, we've had a couple of releases of him. I think I'm going to take him off the list just because while he was very prominent in the Black Arc, I don't think he's a character that's necessarily highly sought after by fans, so for now we're going to take him off. Next up we have Hit, which kind of falls in the same category. I think there's a lot of stuff you could do that'd be cool with him, having unique attacks and things like that would make a nice variation off the original release, but just based off of kind of the options available, Hit is someone I'm going to take off as well. That just leaves us with Trunks from Super and Jiren. I'm a little torn on which one to go with here. I think just because we've gotten so much Trunks at this point over the last year or so, I'm going to take Trunks off. I know that original release is a figure that people really want in the aftermarket, so I could see them going with him, and they could do a lot of cool things with his character, but just based off having to make a selection here, Jiren is who I'm going to go with as far as the next exclusive that I think would be selected. I talked about it a little bit before. Having a metallic red option would be a cool variation. They could do other attacks as well, but we'll have to see ultimately if they wind up going with that, what that looks like. Next up, I'm going to just eliminate some characters that have made it to this round, but I don't necessarily see as being as likely for exclusives. Starting with Hercule. He's a character that I personally feel like is very undervalued and underappreciated in both the figure form and in the franchise. We have gotten one obviously in the past, and I think they probably just do a reissue at some point of that figure. But just because of the character in itself, I don't think it's one that necessarily gets used for a con. Next is Great Saiyaman. I thought this one in the past would be a logical choice for a convention exclusive, just because of the unique things they could do for him, and the fact that I think this falls in the category of a figure that people started to appreciate a little bit more after he already came out, so I think it's possible for this one, but for the sake of eliminating, he's going to be off the list for now. Next up we have Tien. I think Tien is probably less likely. I think having the variations you would have for him are probably too extreme to do for a convention exclusive, just because there's a lot that you would need to add to his attire there, so we'll take him off as well. Moving down to the superhero Broly duo. Gogeta, I kind of talked about already. He has most of what you would want in that figure already in the prior release, so I don't necessarily think that he's a high likelihood here. When it comes to Broly, this one's a little bit challenging because Broly is somebody that everybody loves, and they love to put out variations of him and just re-releases. I think the fact that he did get that New York Comic-Con version of the powered down one where he had the metallic gold hair, I think that version kind of lends it to being, maybe we skip Broly this year, maybe we'll come back to it sometime in the future, but I think having done a version of him already, and I've obviously already done the Z Broly as well, I think we skip him now, but I think it's one that we look at again in the future. From there, jumping to Super Buu. I think Super Buu has some options when it comes to Buuhan or Buu Tanks, but I'm not sure if those would be significant changes that folks would be annoyed with, as far as that's an exclusive item as opposed to just a separate release. So with that, I think I'm going to take Super Buu off as well. This next one, I am going to go with kind of a flyer here and say the Grade 8 Vegeta is our third selection. I think having a bigger figure this year, again, makes sense to bring back, kind of like we did Shenron in the past. Except I think Grade 8 Vegeta would be a much higher seller than Shenron was, just because his price in the aftermarket is quite high, and I think people would like an upgraded, improved look of that same character. So I'll go with that as my third one. Because we're picking that for our third one, I'm going to say no to Saiyan Saga Vegeta. I think having Grade 8 version already means you probably don't double down and say both characters from the same situation. So we'll take off Saiyan Saga Vegeta. And then from there, we have Cooler. While he is a lot of fans' favorite figure, I don't necessarily see specific variations at this time that would make sense. Also, they haven't done any Z movie villains for convention exclusives yet, so similar to kind of how I talked about in the past, if there hasn't been a trend of something before, I'm going to lean towards saying it won't happen, at least at this point in time, but it would be awesome if they do that sometime in the future, so we'll have to see. Gotenks, I think the only big thing you could do here is the Super Saiyan 3 head, and I think people would be pretty frustrated if you had that as a convention exclusive. Granted, they could do the whole, convention exclusive and then years later come out with a general release that's doing the same thing. So it's certainly a possibility, but I'm going to remove him as well. Then we have Roshi here. So I mentioned if we have a OG Dragon Ball character, my thoughts is it would be Roshi. Since we picked the character from Super, I think Roshi remains off the list for now. Yeah, as I mentioned, if we wind up doing something Dragon Ball, he's my pick, but if we don't go back to Dragon Ball at this point, I think Super is probably more likely to be something that gets focused on at this point in time, so I'll stick with somebody like Jiren over Roshi. Then we have Piccolo and Bardock. So Piccolo could have some unique things when it came to a special beam cannon or a, yellow powering up superhero movie version of things like I mentioned with the superhero version of his character. But at this point in time, I'm going to say they don't go with that. I think Piccolo gets his time to shine sometime in the future when it comes to convention exclusives, but I'll say for right now, he's not somebody that I would select. That leaves Bardock as the last character, so he's going to be my fourth pick that I ultimately do think gets selected. They have the mold here from Bardock. They obviously just did a reissue recently. I think having a Super Saiyan head is a unique enough difference that allows it to be a convention exclusive, but doesn't necessarily overly anger fans that view it as being something that should be generally available. So Bardock will be ultimately my fourth pick for selecting the convention exclusive from this list. So that sums it up. These are the four characters that I feel like personally make sense as convention exclusives. We have Super Saiyan 3 Goku, we have Jiren, we have Grade 8 Vegeta, and we have Bardock. Obviously, we'll find out in the next month and a half what the announcements wind up being, so look forward to that. I'm sure they're going to be awesome regardless of if there are any of these that I mentioned here on this list or if there's something completely out of left field. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Who do you think gets selected? Who would you want to be selected? We'll love to get engagement and see what you guys think there. But other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.